I can't believe that this is my life and I'm actually writing this. My life story with the person I married just continues to morph over time. I made a huge mistake and I've felt alone, confused and unsafe since the very beginning. I always knew this person was not for me, didn't even show an interest in me at that, yet stayed with me and I thought that stood for something. I'd constantly battle in my mind if this is the way a relationship/marriage is supposed to feel or if I'm living in some sort of fantasy of the way I hoped it would be, filled with love, intimacy, and connection. I equated sex for love and the fact that he wanted to marry me made me feel like it had to be right. I constantly wondered what he saw in me aside from maybe being a pretty face. Because he didn't seem interested in me as a person at all and couldn't connect with me on a deeper level. Why would he be here then, I'd think? Maybe he needed more time? Though his energy told another story, and I would think by the time he desired to marry a person, that closeness would have already been established. However, he always looked serious and eventually irritated around me, and no matter how many times I tried to check in with him to see what's going on, he would time after time again say nothing, everything's fine. This went on for years. No emotion, extremely surface-level exchanges that involved talks about what's for dinner, the weather, his fascination with cars, his job and the logistics of it, people on his team, obstacles he'd encounter with certain projects, etc. I would always listen and found this to be the extent of connection we had with one another. It's what I held on to. I never felt like he was truly interested in me as a person or anything I felt or had to say, no matter what it was about. I'm talking anything from vulnerable conversations regarding childhood to present-day adulthood, our lives, our children, just life and general interests, conflicts, beliefs, hopes, faith, dreams for the future, specific goals for myself, for him, our family. I know nothing. It truly felt like trying to engage with a stone wall. I had came to the realization pretty late in the game and years after being married that I've always felt stagnant with him. We never talked about anything of substance from the beginning of time. I don't even know what he believes in faith-wise. And that is so absurd to me. I eventually convinced myself to accept that I'm married to someone I can't connect with on any level. There was no leadership on his behalf in the home. He was literally a body that's just there, and I'm the one that carried the weight of managing the house, making sure bills were paid as he can't manage money at all, keeping up with anything and everything that involves having children while still working a full-time job myself. I felt depleted and empty and never felt I was able to win his approval or feel affirmed or valued by him in any way. There were a few times throughout the marriage where he would randomly just say thank you. I'd ask him for what since he would say it at such random times, and he would just reply by saying just for being you. I've done a lot of work on myself to figure out why I let this go on and last for so long. I was 22 when this all started and am now 37. I had always felt things were just not right, but he wouldn't acknowledge any of it. It was strange. I feel like I stood paralyzed in the analysis of it all. Even therapy, that I signed us both up for, he refused to go with me. He would go alone for years, and so I would go to the same therapist as well, but separate. So 5 years into this marriage, 1 child later, together for a total of 7 years at this point, I discovered my husband sexting and exchanging explicit photos with an ex-girlfriend and telling her that he should have married her instead. I was so beside myself. When I confronted him about it, he said he was sorry and didn't know why he did it. That he was just being selfish for a second. As if it's not already bad enough, I knew her and she is the niece of his stepfather. The two of them went out first, then introduced his mother and her uncle, to which in turn they married. So she's been around family parties, and there's instances where I've had to be around her. I would greet her and even small talk with her to not make it awkward. When I discovered this form of infidelity, I felt so betrayed, scared and confused. But it was as if nothing ever happened. He apologized. I tried to have a more in-depth conversation about why it happened and what happens next, and my husband just dismissed me like he always has. We were already actively seeing the same psychologist, separately, so I would just talk about my marriage whenever I would go to my sessions. The next few weeks we didn't say a word to each other. It was complete silent treatment in our home. I was devastated and trying to process it and figure out what's next, and I guess he just had nothing to say. It was during this time that I found out I was pregnant with our second child. This made everything even more confusing. I felt like he stole the joy of something so sacred to me. We had been trying for her leading up to this. He didn't seem thrilled about it, and in hindsight, why would he? Just a couple weeks prior, he was sexting his ex. I still don't know what ever came of it, if they met up with one another. The messages ended abruptly in mid-conversation of their sexting. I will never know. I felt very alone during my pregnancy. At that point, I decided to just carry on and forget about what happened. My husband didn't seem attracted to me much either, he barely even touched me. We rarely became intimate while I was carrying as much as I told him I wanted it. He didn't seem sexually aroused anymore by my pregnant appearance. I had our second daughter and life just continued to feel very robotic and stagnant with now the added responsibility of another child. 3 years later, something told me to look at my husband's Apple Watch that he left on the nightstand. And that's when I discovered the second affair, this time indefinitely physical with his coworker. They would get hotel rooms after work. She would tell him to make sure he deleted their messages before returning home to me. I knew the marriage was 100% over. When I nervously confronted him, he responded that me and him are done and he wants a divorce. No remorse. Was just upset that I looked on his watch. Told me what they had going on was none of my business. He left and that was the end of it. All just feels like a big mystery to me. It's been 2.5 years. My daughters are now 10 and 5. He never filed the paperwork, so we're legally still married. He makes a little over $100K with just a high school diploma. Stayed at the same workplace since high school and worked his way up the ranks, now making what he makes. I don't make nearly that even though I have a BA, obtained that before having our children, but I'm back in school now obtaining my master's to be able to make more money as I can't get past a certain salary with my experience and background. I've had to move into a one-bedroom with my children to afford rent and get back on my feet. I did take him to court for child and spousal support a year ago, so I'm currently receiving that. He's continued to live with extended family, paternal aunt/husband and their kids in their spare guest room, doesn't pay rent, helps them out in other ways I learned, contributes monetarily to household projects/maintenance, supports their drinking/smoking habits, groceries, watches their kids if they go away, cleans, with my children spending overnights with him there every other weekend. I've expressed my concern about our daughters not having a space of their own and sharing a full-size bed with him for these 2.5 years, that I don't find it appropriate. The girls are becoming older and they deserve better, but he's just ignored me. I stopped overnight 6 months ago as I was so upset by the living situation, to which he took me to court and the judge granted him back the overnights. Told the judge he had an apartment lined up that a friend was hooking him up with, which never happened. He told me it fell through and on a $100K salary can't afford to live on his own. A 38-year-old man. Fast forward to last month, my daughters came home telling me they met with Daddy's friend from work. I asked them her name and it wasn't the same one he cheated with. It was another woman I remember that was on his team as well. Now every weekend/break he's had them this month, they're suddenly with this woman, and this past week she's been sleeping over his aunt's house with my children too. She even woke up on Christmas morning to watch them open their gift as they were with him this year. I asked him about this as he didn't mention this will begin happening, and I kept getting ignored through text message, to which I had to confront him in person about it. He told me it's none of my business. I told him it was my business to know if another woman he's with is now going to start being around my children, as that's an important change in their life and it's happening suddenly. They met her 2 weeks ago and now this week she's sleeping over and partaking in Christmas with my children. He didn't say anything, just stares at me blankly. I asked him if she knows he's still married to me, his team all know he was/is a married man with children, and why he hasn't just divorced me already since he's financially in a position to file, as opposed to me who is struggling to stay afloat and has actual bills, rent, utilities, etc. It's been 2.5 years. I don't even qualify for legal aid due to it not being a case of domestic violence. He said she's aware we're still married and he'll start to work on it. Not only do I feel contempt for him, but I feel particularly disgusted with the aunt and husband who allow all this to go down in their home with my children there and him still being a married man. I've always felt like no one gets me in his world. Not him, not his family. Anything goes. Everything is accepted, it seems, and no one sees how it's wrong and dysfunctional. He hasn't even had an actual discussion with the girls, especially our 10-year-old, about this new change. She's just his friend from work that sleeps over and wakes up with them. I stress the importance of not labeling her as just that, considering the circumstances and how that can be confusing to our child, and he should have a talk with her and be truthful instead of labeling her as his coworker to the kids. WTFFF. We don't sleep with work friends. I don't appreciate my children learning that's just a normal thing people do. He said he's not having a talk with them about it until they're more permanent. I'm just so perplexed. There are no words for the level of betrayal, devastation, and mindfuck this person has been in my life. I feel like he ruined me. Ruined my prime years and just degraded and dishonored me as not only a wife, but a person. I'm trying so hard to heal from this. Let go completely. Look down on it all and move forward, but I can't help but to feel like I'm still in the thick of it and feeling so horrible about the way my life has played out. In the beginning of him leaving, he tried to stay friendly with me, but I made it very known that I wanted nothing to do with small talk, laughing, pretty much acting like nothing happened at what he was hoping for. After all this time, I still can't even bring myself to look him in his face. I just keep my eye contact on our girls during exchanges. I feel like I get PTSD anytime I have to be in proximity to him during exchanges or if I hear his voice on a call. I just don't know how to cope and move on. I'm afraid I'll always feel stuck in the pain and confusion of it all. I'm just looking for advice on all of this.